Hello, everybody. Welcome to night 2, preview 2. Let me get our slides up for us. In the meantime, let's see. Sorry, give me just 1 second. There we go. All right. How are you all doing today? Welcome back. This is night 2, preview 2 for our Fiveable Cram sessions that are coming up. Just a couple of reminders as we get started. Just keep in mind to, we have a community agreement, be supportive. The chat is an excellent way to be really supportive of fellow students. Be kind. Yeah, we are indeed all real people. I think last time Sean said, I don't know if you're real, but I'm certainly real. So be kind to each other. Let's see. My slides aren't working right now. There we go. So how to make the most of the crams that we have going on. So you can check out tonight's slides right below. So there's a link to check out tonight's slide where you can make a copy, you can take notes, you can do all of those things. We also have Cram Hub that you can opt into, and this is where you'll get the 5 nights in a row for our crams for AP Psych. We can put a link up to that in just a little bit. I want to make sure you guys get your slides first. We have that chat that you can see off to the right. The chat's really helpful for throwing around some ideas and answering questions really quickly. Sometimes chat can get really overwhelming as well. So if you find that it's a little too noisy, you can close the chat. Unfortunately, we cannot turn it off, but you can definitely close it. Another really useful tool is the Q&A tab. You can pop any questions over in the Q&A tab. You can upvote them as well, and our team will get on to answering those for you. So again, tonight is our second night of Cram previews. This is actually the wrong slide deck that I've noticed I've pulled up. So what I'm going to do is stop sharing real fast. If maybe the team that is here can go through their own introductions, and I can pull up the preview 2, not the night 2 slides.
Yeah, of course. Hi, everyone. Welcome. My name is Victoria. I'm so excited to be with you guys here tonight. I'm a first-year student at the University of Alabama studying public relations and communication studies, and psychology was my favorite AP subject back in high school, so I'm so glad to be back and teaching.
Hi, my name's Ria. I'm a freshman neuroscience major at the University of Texas at Dallas, and I loved AP Psych too. I feel like my psych teacher made it such a fun class, and yeah, I'm really excited to be here with y'all tonight.
Hi everyone, my name is Sean Ispenjon. I'm from Los Angeles, California. I'm a senior in high school and I'll be attending Brown University in the fall. I took AP Psych my sophomore year and I've loved it ever since, and I'm really excited to be here with you all today.
Yeah, so as Jenna continues to get our slides back up, I'm curious, I know we're all curious, how many of you guys were with us for night 1 on Tuesday night? How many returners do we have? Like, drop something down in the chat, put a hand emoji, say hey. Oh, we got a lot of people that was here. Well, welcome back. And if this is your first night with us, then welcome. We're so excited to have you guys.
There we go. We're back. Sorry about that. I pulled up the regular night 2, not the preview night 2, but we are all set up. We've got it all figured out for you guys. Thanks so much for introducing yourselves. My name is Jenna Lunge. I am your teacher host. Clearly not tech savvy today, but we're on it. I'm a PhD candidate at Oakland University, which is just outside of Detroit, Michigan. You might have heard of us recently from the NCAA college tournaments, and also the NFL draft is being held in Detroit tonight. So go the city of Detroit. Yeah, other than that, we're going to get started. So you can follow Think Fiveable on our socials. We're on every major social media platform, and you can get following us there. Other than that, we've got Cram Mode. Cram Mode is the 5 nights in a row. We have tons of different subjects. With Cram Mode, you've got access to like 40 different prep books. You've got 24/7 access to a lot of different questions and content and practice questions. And also the big thing is our 5 nights of Cram Mode back to back to back to back right before your AP tests, which is huge. And that's what we're giving you guys a preview of tonight. All right.
Yeah, so once again, welcome back. My name is Victoria, and today we're going to be talking about Unit 5, which is essentially cognitive psychology. So this is going to be just a quick preview. And before we get started, I just want to know, what do you guys already know about cognitive psychology? Today we're going to be talking a lot about memory, long-term memory, different types of memory. So it helps us a lot if we already see what you already know and see where we're starting from. Okay, I love the answers I'm seeing in the chat. Implicit, somatic, procedural. Awesome. So you guys know quite a lot. All right, so let's get started. So as we kind of already know, long-term memory is definitely a lot different than short-term memory. Unlike short-term memory, long-term memory is the type of memory stored over extended periods of time. Short-term memory can be stored for about maybe 30 seconds, but their capacity is very, very limited. However, long-term memory is unlimited in capacity, and its duration can be from years to a lifetime. Essentially, we can create long-term memory with repeated neural stimulation. Essentially, when we learn something new, we have our two nerve cells that make a neural pathway, and they communicate through that pathway. If you were here for night one, we talked about through the transmission of neurotransmitters. Now, there are two major factors that come with memory as a whole and long-term memory. Our first one is the hippocampus. And the hippocampus and the amygdala. So the hippocampus, just a refresher, is a part of the limbic system, and it's greatly involved in the memory process as well as learning and emotion. And its biggest job is to help our short-term memories be transferred into our long-term storage in our brains. Essentially, the sensory signals are transcribed in our prefrontal cortex, and then we take them over to our hippocampus to be transcribed. The amygdala is important in enabling us to acquire and retain these lasting memories or our emotions. Now, Sean is going to talk a little bit more about different types of memories, but essentially, our hippocampus is associated with declarative and episodic memory. It definitely are explicit memories as well. And we take them once again for the prefrontal cortex and we process them in our hippocampus. For the amygdala, it's associated with memory and fear memories as well, as far as emotion goes. And it deals a lot more with implicit memories, as we are processing them in our own individual cortexes, but it can also be processed in our amygdala. And it's not on the slide, but our cerebellum is so important with memory and long-term memory as a whole too, as it processes our procedural memories. And those are the type of memories such as learning how to play a piano. Now, long-term potentiation, otherwise known as LTP, is the long-lasting increase in synaptic efficiency. Essentially, it just means that it is the process by which our synaptic connections between neurons become stronger with frequent activation. You know the saying, practice makes perfect? That's essentially through the process of LTP, as the practice throughout that process helps improve our learning and our memory as a whole. Now, there's a neurotransmitter that is definitely greatly involved in this, and that's our acetylcholine neurotransmitter, and that plays a role in memory, learning, attention, and involuntary muscle movement as well. And then low levels of this neurotransmitter can contribute to a lot of different medical conditions, one being Alzheimer's disease. Sean's now going to talk about the different types of memories that we have.
Thank you, Victoria. So, as Victoria mentioned, our long-term memory is our relatively permanent, unlimited storage of memories. Once information is there in our long-term memory, it's usually going to be there forever. So, our long-term memory has two different types. We have explicit and implicit. Explicit or declarative memories, which you can see on the left-hand side of the screen, is the conscious recall of memories. So, what does that mean? Explicit or declarative memories are memories of facts or events that we consciously know and that we can declare. So explicit memories themselves fall into two subcategories. We have semantic and episodic. So looking at semantic first, semantic memories are general knowledge of the world. They're facts, meanings, terms and definitions, or categories that are not related to your personal experiences. They're just general knowledge of the world. And the other category, which is episodic memories, are, as you can tell, personal experience. They are specific events, situations, or experiences that you have lived through, and they're stored in your memory in a sequential series. So those are our explicit or declarative memories, conscious recall of memories. On the other side, we have our other category, which is implicit or non-declarative memories. And this is the unconscious recollection of memories. So we have that conscious versus unconscious. So implicit memories are not intentionally recalled, but they influence your day-to-day behaviors and performance. So implicit or non-declarative memories also have their own two subcategories. We have procedural and emotional. So looking at procedural memories first, they're your motor skills. They're memories of skills and how to perform them. So things like riding a bike, tying your shoes, typing on a keyboard. These are all procedural memories. There are things that are difficult to describe with words or put into words, but they're things that you do on a day-to-day basis and you don't really think about it. Remember, it's unconscious. The other category we have is emotional memories, which is just classical conditioning. And if you stick with us a bit, when we review Unit 4, you'll learn about classical conditioning very much in depth. But just a quick term, classical conditioning is a learning process where two stimuli become associated with each other. So in that association, there's a learned behavior, and that learned behavior is unconscious. It's not something you're thinking about. So remember, the difference between explicit and implicit memories is that conscious versus unconscious. Yeah.
Yeah, and then a really good example of that emotional unconscious processing has to do with little Albert. And I don't know if y'all learned this in AP Psych, but little Albert was this little kid and he was classically conditioned to become afraid of small white animals. And so he wasn't like doing any work or like putting in any effort to gain that memory, that like new fear. But because the researcher was conditioning him, he became like conditioned to have a fearful response whenever he saw that animal. But yeah, I thought that was pretty crazy. So now for the different types of encoding, there's a couple different ones. So the first one is semantic. And so semantic literally means meaning. So it's when you're giving a piece of information some sort of meaning, a deeper like understanding of it. So a really good example of this is like, as a native English speaker, when you're learning Spanish, you'll learn that gracias means thank you. So you give the word gracias meaning by giving it the English translation of thank you. So you're semantically encoding that word into your memory. Then there's something else called acoustic encoding. And for acoustic, think like acoustic guitar, like it has to do with what you hear. So you're focusing on the sounds. And a really good example of this is getting like a jingle stuck in your head. Or for me, like the past couple weeks, I don't know if y'all know the new Hosier song, like Too Sweet. I've had this like one line stuck in my head over and over, but that would be an example of an acoustic memory. Okay, and then for visual, that has to do with focusing on imagery, so what you see. So whenever you close your eyes and you remember what your house looks like, that's an example of visual encoding. And then there's different depths of processing. So there's shallow processing, which is really just surface level encoding. You're not giving that word any deeper meaning, or you're not really like processing what's going on. It's just that. So an example of this would be like when you get a code on your phone and you have to like type it into like a website, you're going to see that number and like say it to yourself maybe like 5 times and then type it in. And you'll be able to do it a second later. But if I asked you the next day what those numbers were, you probably wouldn't remember because it was really shallow processing. You didn't give those numbers any deeper meaning. And 2 really important concepts that are kind of related to shallow processing are the primacy and recency effects. So the primacy effect has to do with the fact that when you're given a series, like a list of numbers or anything really, you're going to remember the first things, like the prime ones, the best because you were introduced to them first. And then the recency effect has to do with the fact that you're going to remember the last couple things in that list, in that series, the best because it's the most recent thing you heard. It's fresh in your mind. So those are 2 really important AP Psych concepts as well. And then there's deep processing. So that's kind of the flip side of shallow processing, where you're giving these things semantic, you're giving them meaning. So we're going back to that semantic encoding and we're making sure that it's really like going into your long-term memory. And so an example of this would be like learning information in AP psychology. You have to have elaborate practice, like go through your flashcards or like review the information, because if you don't do that, it's just going to stay in that surface level, shallow area. And so this is a really big reason why teachers will encourage you to start studying like a couple days, or like for the psych exam, you're starting already like a couple weeks in advance, because you need to give your brain time to really form those connections and form that semantic connections between the information you already know and what you're learning. And then mnemonic devices really help to enhance deep processing. So a really good example I have for memory is like the hippocampus. You're giving, like, you might not know what a hippocampus is, but one thing my AP Psych teacher taught me to remember the function of it is that if you saw a hippo on campus, you would remember it. So the hippocampus has to do with memory. So now it might help you remember the purpose of the hippocampus. And then in the chat, if y'all want to share some of your favorite AP Psych mnemonics, because they're a really great way to help with deep processing and remembering some difficult information. So then we have automatic processing, and that has to do with unconscious encoding. So kind of the things Sean mentioned earlier with the implicit memories, but it's all things like procedural memory, where things are, like the location of things, the sequence of events, the frequency of events. It's all things that you're processing, but you're not really putting in the effort to know what's happening. And so examples of this would be like riding a bike or walking. You don't really need to like think deeply about how to walk when you're like, you've been walking for a while. So that's an example of automatic processing. And then there's effortful processing, which is an example of something that takes conscious effort to retain this information. So an example would be learning a new unit in AP Psych. You need to put in the effort to know what the vocab words mean, what brain regions are involved, what researchers are involved. And then that's another reason why you need to give yourself time when you're learning these difficult concepts to make sure that these connections in your mind are really getting formed for you to remember what you're learning. And then, so encoding is really important for taking these memories from your initial sensory stage into the long-term and the memory, and encoding it into your mind.
So thank you, Ria. So memory storage and retrieval. So we just talked about how we categorize and how we encode our memories, but how do we keep these memories alive? So encoded and consolidated information is stored relatively permanently over an extended period, potentially lasting from minutes to decades. So think of our long-term memory storage like a massive warehouse where we have everything from recent to extremely old memories, and they're all stored in their own individual boxes. And you can access these boxes or these memories whenever you need to recall them. And remember that our long-term memory is basically unlimited, so we can keep adding as many of these boxes or memories as we need as time goes on. So the first term you'll see under storage is rehearsal. So rehearsal refers to the process of repeatedly practicing material so that it can be remembered. It's a cognitive strategy that helps us retain information over time. And the best example I can give you of rehearsal is how we rehearse our lines before a play, right? We rehearse our lines over and over again so when we get up on stage, we can say our lines as we need to. And that is the basic example of rehearsal that a lot of people use on a day-to-day basis. The second term is schemas. So schemas are mental frameworks that help us organize and interpret information. So what does that mean? Schemas are essentially structures that provide a blueprint for processing similar future events. So for example, if a young child may first develop a schema for a horse. So she knows that a horse is large, it has hair, 4 legs, and a tail. That's the schema. So every time in the future that she encounters a horse, she can use this schema to identify it. However, when the little girl encounters a cow for the first time, she might initially call it a horse because it's large, has hair, 4 legs, and a tail. So she might think that that cow is actually a horse. That mistake right there is called what we call assimilation. It's when you're taking in new information from the world and applying it to existing schemas that you have. So she would be taking in new information from the world, which is seeing a cow for the first time, and applying it to existing schemas, the horse, which is why she might have thought it was a horse. So in addition to assimilation, we have another thing called accommodation. And accommodation is when we alter our existing schemas or develop new schemas as a result of new information. So upon seeing a cow for the first time, she might develop a new schema. So in the future, she's able to recognize cows versus horses.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, so let's talk retrieval. So in order to talk memory, we have to first have a proper understanding of the information processing model. Essentially, this model is an example of the serial processing, which essentially means that information forms in a very specific order, and only one process can be occurring at a time. So as Raya kind of started out, we first take our information in. This can be through our senses or through sensories, and then we encode it. Our brain then encodes that information. Once that information is encoded, then it gets processed and stored, which is kind of what Sean was just talking about, the different ways to store information. And then when we need that information, we have a process called retrieval, which is what we're going to talk about now. Now, there are different types and different stages of retrieval. First we have is recall. Now, recall is a type of retrieval is when you're able to remember information without necessarily being prompted. Think of, let's say we're taking a test, and on this test, we come across a question and the answer is blank. There's no word bank, there's no multiple choice questions to help prompt you or remember the information. Essentially, you have to think of the information all on your own based on what you can remember and recall. So that's essentially what recall is. Recall is just what type of information or what different types of information you can remember without being helped or prompted or led to the answer. Next, we have recognition. Recognition is when you can notice or remember information that you learned previously. Now, unlike recall, recognition is prompted information. So going back to that same kind of test that we're taking, we come across a new question, but this question has multiple choice answers. Now, these answer choices mostly relate to the question, and it kind of helps us jog our memory about where we're supposed to be or what the correct answer is. In recognition, the information is already shown to you, and it's just our brain's job to recognize and identify the correct answer and the correct information that we've already previously learned. And lastly, it's not on the slide, but we also have relearning as another process of retrieval. And relearning is essentially the phenomenon that it's a much easier and it's much faster process to remember or relearn information that we've previously learned but forgot. So it's essentially just how fast we can relearn information that we've learned before but might have forgotten about. Now, retrieval cues are very important. I know we were talking about mnemonics in the chat as well. Those are great examples of retrieval cues. They're just different things that can help prompt or trigger our minds for retrieval, essentially. Things like songs, smells, acronyms, they're so important in AP psychology and so important in real life in order to help us remember the things that are pretty stuck in the far back of our brains. Now we're going to talk about context-dependent memory. Context-dependent memory is essentially the ability to recall information when the context present at encoding and retrieval are the same. Essentially, it kind of just says that we have a stronger ability to recall information if we are in the same environment in which the original memory was formed. Think of things like if I lose my keys or my cell phone, or if anyone loses their things. The first thing that we tell people is, go back to where you last had them, or go back to the time that you last remember having them in your hands or putting them down. Essentially, it's being able to retrieve memories that correspond with the physical setting that we were in at the time. Now, a common fallacy is that in order to retrieve those type of memories, you have to be in that specific physical state, and that's not true. I can be 50 years old and sitting on my couch and remember information that I remembered at the time of processing, but in a different type of way. And that can be true, but that just wouldn't be an example of context-dependent memory. I want to know in the chat, what is your guys' favorite examples of context-dependent memory? Mine, something that happened to me recently, is that I was in my intro to rhetoric class on Tuesday and I was craving mashed potatoes. Like nothing can get in between me and my mashed potatoes that day. But by the time I got home later on that day and I went into my kitchen, I opened my fridge, I could not remember for the life of me what I wanted to eat, why I wanted there, why I was even standing in the kitchen. And I ended up forgetting about it. However, I had that same class again today, and I sat in my same, I'd say, assigned seat, because in college we kind of assign our own assigned seats. But I sat in the same class and I sat in my own seat, and I immediately remembered the mashed potatoes that I was craving. And that's a great example of context dependent memory, as I was in that same physical state, in that same physical location, which helped jog my memory to remember what I wanted beforehand. Something my AP psychology would used to teach me back when I was in high school is that you always want to study in the same setting or at least a close enough type of environment as your test would be in, as it helps you jog your memory and remember a lot more the information that you learn. And that's a perfect example of context dependent memory. And that's an example I hope you guys all take when you're practicing for the AP exam. If you study in a quiet area with your feet on the ground, your laptop on your desk, your materials on your desk, it kind of stimulates the same environment that you'll be in when you're taking your AP psychology exam, which will make it a lot easier to remember rather than if you were lying in your bed and the TV was playing. Why? Like, why does this matter? How does this happen? Essentially, there's a link between the context and the subject. And when you form new memories, our brain encodes and stores not just what we're practically focused on. So let's say if I'm at a party and I meet a new person, and as I'm listening to this person talk, even though I'm only focused on this person, what's so crazy that our brain does is it encodes everything around me. So even if I'm not focused on the music that's playing, it will encode it. Even if I'm not focusing on the physical layout of the room, it will encode it as well. So it's things like that that contribute to our environment and the context of the situation that we remember our memories. Now, for contextual dependent memories, they can be strong, and they could be a lot stronger if, going back, we have our retrieval cues. And these are our popular mnemonics that makes things a lot easier to remember, such as songs playing, acronyms, and things like that can help us jog our memory a lot better. Now, state-dependent memory is a lot different than context-dependent memory, as state-dependent memory is more internal, while context-dependent memory is a lot more external. Now, state-dependent memory states that when we retrieve memories that correspond with the same psychological state of consciousness, such as maybe if we were encoding things when we were drowsy, half asleep, or if we were encoding things when we were wide awake and maybe in class, or if we were drunk that day, we will remember it a lot better if we're in that same psychological state of consciousness as when those memories were originally formed. How? So as kind of said a little bit in the beginning, when we learn something new, our brain connects our two neurons, these cells, to make a neural pathway. Essentially, these cells can communicate through neurotransmitters while at the state. And when we enter that same state of consciousness, the cells are more likely to communicate, which helps jog those types of memories. An example is like if you're studying, and I do not recommend, please do not get me in trouble, but if we're studying for a test and let's say you choose to take some Adderall to help you focus and stay awake and really remember what you're doing, the next day, you are more likely to remember what you learned the night previous if you take that same if you take those same pills of Adderall. Not that I recommend. Essentially, being in that same state of consciousness and putting your mind back in that type of psychological state can help jog your memory a lot more than if you were to do something different. Other common factors that can help mess with your state of consciousness at the time is your mood. If you're extremely happy that day or extremely sad. Sean, he's not here tonight, but his favorite example is like, I hope you don't get your heart broken up with the night before a test, because it's totally going to just mess up with your studying and your learning and your retrieval process the next day. Things like pain and fear can also have a huge process on your state of consciousness as well. So same with context, there's no parameter on when these emotions will be triggered or when these type of memories will be triggered. And it could happen now, it can happen in 100 years from now, and it can happen in different kinds of environments. That just wouldn't be the proper explanation of a state-dependent memory. My question for you guys, I just want to know, like, what is your favorite example of state-dependent memory? And then there's one type of memory that I want to talk about, which is not on the slide, but it's also very popular. It's called mood congruent memories. And essentially, these are the type of memories that we retrieve that correspond with the mood that we are in. For example, if I'm mad at somebody, I can instantly or more likely remember the other times that I was mad at them, even if it was about a completely different topic. Now, Sean is going to talk a little bit, Ryan and Sean are going to talk a little bit more about memory distortion.
Yes, yeah. So one of my favorite examples, like Victoria was asking about state-dependent memories, has to do with like when you're sick, you feel like your nose is really stuffy and it sucks, but you don't really think about your nose being stuffy when you're not sick. So it's like when you're sick, you remember how nice it was when your nose wasn't stuffy. You have to be in that certain state to really have that memory triggered. Whereas when you're feeling fine, you don't think about it at all. But yeah. So why do memories fade and distort? So first we have to talk about forgetting. I'm sure all of us have forgotten things before. It's literally being unable to retrieve information from storage. So it's in there somewhere, you just can't quite get to it. And there's a couple different theories out there for why this happens. The first one is decay theory. So this is just pretty basic. It's probably what you would think of for why people forget things. It's just that memories fade over time without rehearsal. So it's like forgetting your second grade teacher's name. Or for me, I took Spanish freshman year of high school, and I was pretty good at Spanish back then, but it's been like 4 or 5 years now since I've practiced my Spanish skills. So I wouldn't be able to have that same level of skill anymore because I haven't practiced or rehearsed that information. So that memory has kind of decayed from my mind. And then there's interference theory. So this has to do with competition between the pre-existing memories in your mind during retrieval. And there's two different ways that this can happen. There's proactive interference, which is when your old memories are getting in the way of you recalling new ones. And a good example of this is like you're in sixth grade and you get your locker and you have a locker combo, right? And then you use that all year. But then in seventh grade, you get a new locker and you have a new locker combo. So then the first day of seventh grade, you have your new locker combo and it's in your brain, but you keep putting in your sixth grade combo. That's because your old memories are interfering with your new ones. So it's difficult to kind of like break them apart and start listening to just the new ones. And then there's kind of the flip side of that, which is retroactive interference. And that's when your new memories interfere with your old ones. So you're unable to kind of separate once again which one is more relevant now. And then we have retrieval failure. So this is when you know what something is, like the information is stored in your mind, but there aren't enough retrieval cues for you to like pull it out. So it's like when a word is on the tip of your tongue. You know what the word is, but you just need like a little bit more information to get there. Or you have like a part of a song in your head, and if somebody just gave you like one more word, you could totally know the name of the song. But without that information, it's difficult for you to fully retrieve that information from your memory. And then something that's important with memories fading is amnesia. And so there's retrograde amnesia, and this is when you can't recall what happens before an event. So something happened, and now you don't know what happened before then, but you can still form new memories. So my AP Psych teacher told me about this movie called Memento, and it's kind of old, not like crazy old, but it's about this guy, and his wife died, and he like wrote down like everything about the killer, like what happened. He got tattoos all over his body because he knew that he was going to lose the memories from before that incident. And so he was like trying to use all these clues that he had given himself to like figure out what had happened afterwards, but it was really hard because he couldn't remember anything anymore. And then we have anterograde amnesia, which is the flip side of retrograde amnesia. And this is when you can't create new memories after an event. So a really important example for AP Psych is HM. And HM was an epileptic man who had a surgery to kind of help. They were trying to help alleviate his symptoms. And what actually ended up happening was they took off part of his hippocampus, and he was unable to form new memories after this. So he was kind of living his days on like an infinite loop because he would be able to like interact with people and like he could still talk. He still had his old memories, but he couldn't form any new ones. Like anytime he met a new person, he would like shake their hand and then like turn around for a second and then he'd introduce himself again because he didn't know who they were. But a really interesting thing about HM is that he still had his procedural memory. So even though he couldn't form new like semantic memories, when he was given a task, like something that he had to do with his hands, he improved every time he was retested for that task. Like it took him less time to complete it. And so that's kind of an example how even though he can't form those new episodic or semantic memories, his procedural memories were still improving because he didn't even remember like taking the test for his procedural memory, but he still continued to improve on his times. And then moving on, I think Shant is going to talk a little bit about memory distortion and errors.
Yeah, thank you, Virat. So memory distortion and errors, these are three popular ones that might pop up on your exam. So try to remember these. The first one is misinformation effect. Misinformation effect is false memories we create due to misinformation we receive after an event has occurred. So the example that's given on the screen is there's an accident that happens, and a witness to the accident hears an inaccurate description after the fact and incorporates that information into their memory. So the witness of the accident obviously saw the accident happen and has a correct memory of what happened. But after the accident took place, someone else gave an inaccurate description of the accident, and that was also encoded into their memory. And every time they remember this accident, they're also going to remember the inaccurate description that was given. So that is the misinformation effect. And in real world, in the legal system, eyewitness testimonies can be considered unreliable because of this misinformation effect. So the misinformation that individuals are exposed to after an event, such as a misleading question or inaccurate description given by someone else, or just their memory over time and hearing misinformation over time, can contaminate their memory of what they witnessed, and in the end can make eyewitness testimonies unreliable in court. And that's why there's a lot of different types of evidence that are used in court. Our second one we see is source amnesia. Source amnesia refers to an individual's inability to remember how, when, or where knowledge was acquired while retaining factual knowledge itself. So an example given on the screen is forgetting who told the joke but remembering the punchline. So you're remembering the punchline of the joke itself, but you're forgetting who or the context in which you heard the joke. So looking at the word source amnesia, the source is what we're forgetting and what can't be recalled. So you can recall the factual information itself, but you're unable to recall the source. So whether it's who, how, when, or where that knowledge was acquired. And the third one we have is false memories. And false memories are pretty simple. They are inaccurate or distorted recollections of events that did not actually occur. These false memories can be created through suggestion, leading questions, or other external influences. So the example on the screen is thinking your childhood best friend was Jordan, but it was actually Michael. This is a false memory. It did not happen. And going back to what I said, a leading question. If I said, it's Friday today, right? You might answer yes and think that it's Friday when it's actually not. My leading question prompted you to answer yes and create that false memory of something that did not happen. So yeah, they can be created through suggestion, leading question, or other external influences.
Yeah, and I know that College Board always tests on this somewhere on the exam because it's really relevant, especially like Shant mentioned, for eyewitness testimonies in court cases, because it can get really, really tricky when these different memories distortions kind of play into how people remember things happening when it didn't really happen, or it's not quite the detail that is going to convict somebody. But yeah. So we have a practice question for y'all. And I need y'all to put your answer in the poll, not in the chat, in the poll. So which cognitive bias would most likely lead a juror to disregard evidence presented during a trial because they have a strong preconceived belief about the defendant's guilt? So take a minute, think about it. Don't say anything in the chat so people can think through it and put their answer in, and then we'll go over the answer.
Ooh, I'm seeing some great answers here, guys.
And while we're waiting, keep putting some of those mnemonics in the chat because I feel like those really help me through AP Psych because there's so many different things you have to remember. It's a really good way to help remember things. Okay, we'll give it about like 10 more seconds and then we'll go over the answer. Okay, so the answer was B, and it's confirmation bias. So good job to those of y'all that got it. So confirmation bias is when we have an idea in our mind and we're going to seek out information to kind of confirm that idea. You're not really going to look at information objectively anymore. So in this situation, we kind of have to look, the keyword is preconceived belief. So he already has that notion in his mind, oh, this guy's guilty. So any new evidence he gets is really just going to be used to confirm that bias. He's not going to use it to look at the situation objectively. And so the second highest answer choice I saw was self-serving bias. So that's not really applicable here because self-serving bias, a good example is like when you fail a test and rather than saying, oh, like I should have studied harder, like I didn't really know the content, you're like, no, that test was just really hard. Like that teacher made a really hard test. It wasn't my fault. So you're kind of like looking at the situation in a way that puts you in a favorable light and it's serving yourself in that way. So yeah, now we have a practice cram quiz for y'all, which is going to be really fun. And I love the music on these. But we're going to put the link up for you. So join that and then we'll get started. Yeah, I'm looking at the chat. Self-serving is like gaslighting, bro. That's very accurate. So you can either join the quiz through the link under our images, or you can go through the QR code, and then yeah, we'll get started in like a minute once most people join. Yes, yeah, Sarah. So like if you got you got into a car accident and it was like equally like people's faults, if you were like, no, the other person was just a bad driver, that would be like a self-serving bias.
Yeah, very good, guys. So self-serving bias is essentially just giving yourself positive attributions and kind of giving negative attributions to everyone else. It's never really your fault or your problem, but very good job in the chat.
Jenna, do you think we could get the music for the quiz?
I'm trying, but it's not really working. But I'll keep trying for sure. It's like very slow.
Gotcha.
If anybody else has the quiz up and can share their screen, because it seems to not be going very easily on my end.
I can try.
Yeah, guys. So as we figure that out, just keep on scanning the QR code, or we have the link right there underneath our screens to join this little practice test. This is a great way to test your knowledge, see where you're at. See, it can help you a lot when you're studying a little later, just to see what you already know and what you can still potentially work on.
All right, I see you've got the link open. So if you want to share your screen and take over, that would be awesome.
Okay, can y'all, is everything good? Okay, I'll take that as a yes. So I'll go ahead and start the quiz. Here's the first one. Okay. So the answer for this one is A, the biological perspective. So awesome job, y'all. We got a pretty high percentage on this one. So the key word in this question is neurotransmitters. So anything that really has to do with like neuroscience side of psychology when we're looking at the brain regions or the neurotransmitters or the small details involved, that'll probably have to do with the biological perspective because it's looking at the biology behind what causes people to do certain things, like the psychology behind it. So, yeah. Okay, we'll give it like really. So the answer for this one was retrieval. Awesome. So recalling an equation during a math test, that has to do with bringing a memory out from your storage, and that's retrieval. So yeah, nice job, y'all. Yeah, I need somebody to Shazam this song and put it in the chat because a couple seconds. Okay, so the answer for this one was B. What type of contextual clue would most likely help to facilitate the retrieval of information that was encoded situationally? So if y'all remember, Victoria talked about this. So contextual cues, situational encoding has to do with like the environment in which you're remembering something. So like if you study underwater, like if you're taking a test underwater, you want to study underwater. Like think of that extreme example. So physically recreating where you learned something is going to help you when you're going to need to recall that information. Nice. Okay. So for this one, it's semantic encoding. So semantic, y'all did really great on this one. Semantic, like I said before, it has to do with meaning. So semantic literally means meaning. So anytime it's asking about memories and associating meanings with them, it's probably going to be semantic encoding. All right. Okay, I'm gonna give it like another. So yeah, this is kind of what we talked about earlier with the MCQ, and Sean covered with like how memories change over time. So eyewitness testimonies can become less reliable because your memories can get distorted by misinformation after. So there are a couple of different ways that happens. There was the misinformation effect, source amnesia, false memories. But for misinformation specifically, you just might not remember the details as well. So it's not reliable if you're going to have to use that information to convict someone. But yeah.
All right, just a couple more seconds, and then we're going to reveal the answer. All right, good job. So this one kind of tricked us up a little bit. But the question was, what is the primary cause of distortion in our memories according to the schemas theory? Now remember, guys, our pre-existing kind of biases and notions can help really distort the memories and the information that we learn, which is why this is the correct answer here. Yeah, so we're going to get a few more answers here. Pay attention to some key words in the question to help you guys answer this one. All right, yeah, so the correct answer here was B. Good job, everyone. Now, the key word here was abnormal. So remember, abnormal is a type of behavior that probably doesn't align well with the situation that we're currently in. With the other answer choices, if we're about to take a very important test, it's very common for us to have anxiety and be a little nervous. But the reason why B is the correct answer is because if we have this intense kind of fear, but we're not in a situation that can kind of bring out this sort of emotion, it would be abnormal behavior. All right, let's reveal the correct answer. So the correct answer here was the hippocampus. Very, very well. Remember, you guys, the hippocampus plays a very important role in explicit memories and processing the memories from our prefrontal cortex, and it's processed in our hippocampus. All right, let's reveal it, Ryan. Okay. All right, so this one tricked us up a little bit. So in patients with Alzheimer's disease, which type of memory tends to deteriorate first? And the correct answer here is episodic memories. It's very common. It's the most typical early symptom of Alzheimer's disease out of the choices that are presented. So not saying the other ones won't deteriorate as well, but episodic memory is typically the first common one that starts to deteriorate in cases of Alzheimer's disease. All right, we have one more question for you guys.
Think about HM for this.
All right, let's see what the right answer is. All right, good job, you guys. So the correct answer here is the anterograde amnesia. Remember, it's different than retrograde amnesia, as retrograde is the ability to recall events that happened prior to the incident, while anterograde amnesia deals with being unable to create new memories after the incident. So that was the key phrase and key term here. Very good job. Thank you guys so much for taking this practice test with us. You guys are doing pretty well, and we're so confident that you guys are going to do amazing on this AP exam.
Okay, thank you all for coming down. I need to get down to the stage. I like how we bop our little guys around. Where am I going? Here we go. There we are. We have a survey that is down here. There's a link to the survey right here, which is going to ask you about things that are really helpful for you, things that you need as well moving forward, and how confident you are with your cram quizzes for your AP tests. So if you can fill out the survey that's linked right below, and we hope to see you all for our 5 nights of cramming, 5 nights back to back right before AP Psych tests. And we are confident you guys are going to do really amazing. So pop any questions last minute into the chat. We'll see what we can answer. But other than that, you guys have a great night. And thank you guys so much for coming. Bye, guys.